Have you found yourself in a situation where you're procrastinating on something that you're like, that is so easy, and yet it just sits there taunting you for days, weeks, months?
It can be as simple as just like chasing the blood test or like finishing off my letters, checking my emails.
The reason that we procrastinate, it's not about the task itself. The procrastination is about avoiding discomfort. Procrastination is ultimately about emotional regulation and key, a willingness to feel uncomfortable emotions.
Everything that I procrastinate on, I think, would be summarized by it's very boring. I want to avoid boredom.
You need to catch these little brain tricks. That was actually the way that I originally trained myself to actually voluntarily feel negative emotions.
Do you know what I'm going to do right after this? I'm going to pay my electricity bill, which are in the procrastination pile right now. It's a bit of a win, and I just love a win. Get those things off your list. What have you been procrastinating on? And can you use this 3-step process to overcome that procrastination with us?
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? Hello again, welcome back, our beautiful friends, our Dr. Humans, to another episode of the Poddy. And today we are overcoming procrastination. Yes, we are. It's very, very exciting. Today we are going to give you Beck's 3-step process for overcoming procrastination. So stay tuned till the end. And I personally always need this. I have described myself on this podcast as the queen of procrastination. And whilst I am aware that that is my title, I continue to procrastinate regularly on many, many things. And I'm sure many of you relate to this. It can be as simple as just like chasing the blood test or like finishing off my letters, checking my emails, anything like that in the clinical environment. The simplest of things. And of course, life admin. Don't get me started on life admin. So I'm procrastinating continuously on many, many fronts, and I'm sure you are too. So I'm so excited, Beck, you're going to help us to conquer that and finally become the person who gets over this procrastination situation. And I think this came up recently for you in one of your coaching sessions. Can you tell us a bit about what kind of inspired today's episode?
Yes, and I don't coach specifically on productivity or procrastination, these kinds of topics anymore. However, they always come up in Dear Darling and in coaching in general because really they are emotional challenges. So as much as I don't advertise that I coach on these things, when you start to recognize how your emotions are driving your behavior and your emotions are stepping you out of integrity, then all of these issues come up as we start to try to master our emotions. So I am always actually happy to do coaching on these. And this was a situation that it's not clinical, but I think it really beautifully paints the picture of this kind of like, why am I procrastinating on this? This isn't even a difficult task. And Kristeen listed a couple of things that were challenging, like the clinic letters, like, that is something that, I mean, they're not the most challenging thing, but you know that when you're writing a clinical letter, you're synthesizing and you're also making decisions as you do it, you're planning forwards. It's a lot of cognition and decisions to be made that goes into that. But in this situation, what we were coaching on in the Dear Darling call was procrastinating on what otherwise is a totally delightful task. Have you found yourself in a situation where you're procrastinating on something that you're like, that is so easy, such an easy thing to do, and yet it just sits there taunting you for days, weeks, months? Ooh, yes, right? Because it's not just the big, scary, difficult tasks that we procrastinate on. And that is because the reason that we procrastinate, it's not about the task itself. It's not about the difficulty of the task. It's not even about the amount of decisions and cognitive load that the task demands. The procrastination is about avoiding discomfort. Procrastination is ultimately emotional in that way. It's about emotional regulation and key, a willingness to feel uncomfortable emotions. So in this example, our member was procrastinating on the delightful task of writing a heartfelt letter. And she was like, what? Why? That sounds like delightful, really. And as we coached and dug, what we found was what we know is true in mindset coaching, which is that there is always an explanation for why you are behaving how you behave. There's always a thought that is creating a congruent emotion, and then you're behaving aligned with that emotion. So here, even though the task looked like this delightful, heartfelt, warm feeling card letter to somebody she very much cared about, the truth was she was feeling overwhelmed, under capacity, at a bit of the edge in terms of her energy levels. And her mind was anticipating that when she did that task and she dropped into that softness, that it would flood all these other challenging emotions in that she had just been keeping a lid on, right? Just keeping a lid on so that she can keep showing up to her clinical work over time. So the first solution here that Kristeen and I want to offer you is to actually answer the question when you're like, why am I procrastinating on this? Actually answer the question, right? This is a little bit of mindset coaching here. Go and let your brain tell you why it doesn't want to do it, i.e., what discomfort is it anticipating with this activity? Kristeen, do you have stuff that you procrastinate on when you're like, why?
Well, everything that I procrastinate on, I think, would be summarized by it's very boring. Like, boredom is something I don't want to experience, evidently. So yeah, boredom. I want to avoid boredom. And that is a horrible feeling, is boredom.
It is, isn't it? Boredom's actually a really uncomfortable feeling. I completely agree. And I think for me, it's more the things that have decisions to be made. I think I just anticipate that feeling of like being confronted with the decision that I have to make. I find myself procrastinating on replying to beautiful text messages and things from friends and loved ones. And I think it's because, again, the discomfort that I see is they've written me this lovely message, or I just love them so much. And there's just sometimes a little bit of guilt in my head of like, I should have just replied to that, or maybe I should call them, or blah, 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 sort of thing. So anyway, look for the discomfort. That is the first thing. Even if the task seems delightful, look for the discomfort, and boredom is probably going to be a common one that comes up. Now, with this, that leads you into the completion of that first step. So you've recognized what is the discomfort that I'm avoiding with the procrastination. I'm not just procrastinating the task. When I'm procrastinating, I'm trying to avoid, my mind is trying to avoid a discomfort. And when you have that information, you get this opportunity to be like, oh, is that true? Is it actually true that I'm going to feel that way when I do that thing? Because what I find is when I think that I'm going to be challenged or overwhelmed by the decisions that come up in my emails or something like that when I delve into my inbox, a lot of the time I find that I was building this up in my head to be this big, enormous, challenging thing, when actually the decisions that I could action in my emails can just be like, boom, 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 sorted, easy, 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 right? The reality of the situation was it wasn't that uncomfortable to action those decisions, but it was just the anticipation in my mind, the story in my mind telling me it's going to be so uncomfortable, it's going to be so overwhelming, it's going to be so difficult. Not even true. So that is the first step. And you may or may not be able to question and actually get to the point of saying, yeah, actually, it's not going to be that uncomfortable. And this is where we move on to step 2.
And step 2 is feeling the feeling of the discomfort, whatever that is, whether it is the boredom, whether it is just that sort of anxiety or guilty feeling when something's emotional, whatever it is, like, I guess commit to feeling the feeling, allow yourself to be in that emotion. It's probably not going to actually feel that bad is another thing, which is true, but just allowing yourself into that space. And another thing that I find as well is if I'm committing to feeling this discomfort that I don't want to feel that's causing me to procrastinate, is to set a timer so that I'm only experiencing it for a very short time. So I'll say I'll do this for 5 minutes and I will do my letters. I've got 5 minutes. And often it will go beyond that, but it's just about getting started. So I think that committing to feel the feeling and having it time limited, that's part of step 2.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the time is a really great bargaining chip with yourself to be like, of course, I don't want to feel boredom. Of course, I don't want to feel overwhelmed. However, guys, team brain, we're just doing this for 5 minutes, okay? It's going to last for 5 minutes only. You can do anything for 5 minutes, right? That actually really helps me. That was actually the way that I originally trained myself to actually voluntarily feel negative emotions with not a 5-minute timer. It started with like 30 seconds, guys. Okay. So be kind to yourself here. So step 1 was actually answer your brain's question. Why am I procrastinating on this? Find out the discomfort that you're anticipating. Little bonus there is sometimes when you question that and you actually look at the thoughts, look at why you think it's going to be so uncomfortable, you might find that your brain is like, oh, wait a second, not uncomfortable. I don't have to avoid this at all. If that fails, now, as Kristeen said, step 2 is the willingness to actually just feel the emotion. Little bonus here is you can bargain with yourself to set a timer. Now, step 3 is actually kind of closing the loop, because as we've been talking about so far, usually what's happening in our minds is the discomfort that we're anticipating with this task is far greater than what the discomfort actually is when you're doing the task, right? We build this up and we catastrophize this in our head, and our brain does this for a good reason because it's trying to support us, motivate us to avoid the discomfort, right? So the system kind of works there. You need to catch these little brain tricks, because the truth is you are so able to feel discomfort. You are so capable as a person, as a doctor, of feeling discomfort, especially for a short period of time. But you forget that, and your brain wants to avoid the discomfort altogether. When you actually execute step 2 and follow through with the task, you've actually stepped yourself into step 3 already. But we want you to make this really deliberate. And that is actually taking stock of the fact that that discomfort wasn't as intolerable as you thought. That specifically, you are somebody who's totally capable of handling that discomfort. Step 3 is about actually collecting that evidence to feed back into step 1 that says this discomfort isn't something that I need to avoid, and therefore this task is not something that I need to procrastinate on. If you don't close this loop, hopefully your mind will subconsciously collect this data, this new evidence for you in your life, in your procrastination habit. But I think it is so highly valuable, so high in terms of bang for your buck, of spending this short amount of time of actually taking stock of the evidence, spending 20 seconds thinking about it, reflecting on the fact that you totally did that, it was totally fine, and you're more resilient than you think. That is going to change your whole self-concept around your ability to feel discomfort, and therefore you as a procrastinator, to actually stop you being a procrastinator at all.
I love that sort of shift. And I think it's the part of like celebrating yourself as well. I think that's something I'd like to get into the habit of more. It seems like such a silly little thing, but to celebrate yourself and just like pat yourself on the back for doing something that was like mega boring or uncomfortable. Like, you don't have to tell anyone about it, but just have a little moment with yourself. It's a bit of a win. And, you know, I just love a win. And I must say, Beck, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, do you know what I'm going to do right after this? I'm going to pay my electricity bill and my house insurance bill, which are in the procrastination pile right now. Let's do this, people.
Let's go. What can I do? What can I commit to? I am going to, I don't know why. I need to invoice somebody and I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to commit to creating this invoice. I'm going to create the invoice and I'm going to email it and it will be done. No more cognitive load. Why am I procrastinating on that? I'm going to step 1. I'm literally thinking about trying to go and find my invoice template and download it from Dropbox. And that's apparently going to be so uncomfortable for me. Thanks, brain.
But that is uncomfortable because I know myself that I will self-loathe because I will not have put it somewhere intuitive.
I'm like, why haven't you fixed this yet? And I have to have those thoughts. They're uncomfortable. There you go. That's it. Okay, so step one for me is I'm going to not judge myself because I haven't done that task because I'm doing other important things that I highly value in my life. So I don't need that self-judgment about that silly little folder organization.
Like keeping a mini human alive. Let's just put context on this. Kristeen has not paid her electricity bill because of no reason at all. Meanwhile, Becc is keeping a mini human alive. I think it's important just to delineate those two scenarios.
That's nice, but this issue predated the mini human. I'm just going to take that. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, we hope this has inspired you to get those things off your list. What have you been procrastinating on? And can you use this 3-step process to overcome that procrastination with us today? You got this. Let's go, people. And we cannot wait to see you in another episode very soon.
We get so many heartfelt thank yous from our fellow doctors for having these vulnerable conversations on the podcast. If you want to say thank you too, we would be most appreciative if you left our podcast a review. Reviews actually mean everything to us because they're what make the platform share the podcast with all the other doctor humans. And our mission is to make as many doctors as we can reach feel more human. Just go to your podcast app, click on the show, and find the option to review. The other way you can help us is just by sharing the podcast with someone in your life who you know will say, "Thank you for saying that," or tagging us in social media. And if you're in healthcare looking for speakers for your next event, or professionals who actually get it to facilitate the vulnerable or empowered conversations our teams of doctors need, request us through podcastfordoctors@gmail.com.